So this is a story about Ms. Loop's experiment. And she has a Cursive Clues Club in the school where she's a teacher. And this is the last day of that class for the term, or for that after-school club, the Cursive Clues Club, until the next term. And the kids are getting a test to see whether they're going to get to go on to the next level of Cursive Clues Club. So today, their job, or Miss Loops's job with them, is to review, and then their job is to take a test. And her instruction to them is to find your assigned seat. Now, normally they sit anywhere, but not today. Today they're assigned. So her first instruction is take notes during the review, and then you're going to use your notes for the test. All right, so this is a little different than they're used to, but the review begins with comfortable or uncomfortable. Okay, here's Raven. You can see her name, that's her signature for her first name. So you get a little sense of her handwriting right now. And Raven knew Miss Loops always began by understanding if a person was generally comfortable or uncomfortable inside. But right now, Raven was uncomfortable sitting next to Rima, because being on the same science project team with Rima together had been a disaster for Raven. Raven had been very upset by it. But Miss Loops sat them in their seats on purpose, and she's going to start her review. So here's Miss Loops, and all her words are golden. So you can see the golden lines coming out of her mouth. And Miss Loops says, okay, we're looking at these writings. The writings here are all comfortable. They're comfortable to look at. They're consistent, they're flowing, they're resilient, they're uncomplicated, and they're easy to read. And we know from that that it shows that the person who wrote with comfortable writing is fairly comfortable with who they are, like this girl here. This was one of her writings. Oh, and Miss Loops has to go on and talk about being uncomfortable. So we could see by these two guys that they're not comfortable with who they are, and their writings are one of these. So how are they uncomfortable with their writing? It either looks awkward, it's unreadable, it's too spaced out, it's hard to see how the words hang together. The sizes are inconsistent, big, small, big, small. They're shifty, the slant shifts around, the letters jump up and down. Looking at that kind of writing is uncomfortable, and you can assume there are uncomfortable things those people feel inside. So Raven, she wanted to look at her own writing. Wait, I have to get this out of the way. Raven wanted to write her notes about her own comfort. And then she was going to look at Rima's notes just out of curiosity to see if Rima is comfortable inside. Here is Raven's notes and Rima's notes. So Raven, for herself, she wrote, well, I'm consistent and clear and easy to read. And basically, yes, it is. If you look at it, sometimes all the straight lines, you have to get used to them. But when you look, they're easy to read. But she looked over at Rima's writing, which shows jumpy sizes, and it shows she has jumpy feelings inside. And seeing that, Raven thinks Rima is uncomfortable to read, and she was jumpy and inconsistent and unreliable in the science project. It was so annoying. She's still not happy sitting next to Rima. Okay, Miss Loops is not going to wait. She's going to keep on with her review because she has a plan. So she wants to talk more about comfort and discomfort, but she's going to focus right now on loops because loops show inner emotions, wherever the loop is, and she wants to know more if the loops are comfortable or uncomfortable. So she talks about this size loop and how this is kind of the size of the loop. It would be like if you were wearing the backpack on your inside. And these moderate size of loops show moderate emotions up here and moderate self-expectations down here. And they're a manageable size. And so they're fairly comfortable for the person inside. but not these loops. These loops are a heavy load of discomfort. They're overinflated emotions and overinflated expectations of the self, and they're a really heavy load inside. Not only, Miss Loops is going to point out, is this heavy and uncomfortable, but it's so much wider than the middle zone loop or circle that that circle cannot even handle this big size. It's so much wider, not than this loop, but than this loop. It's so much wider, it's overwhelming to what's practical for this person. And Raven, who has a very strong memory, she has heavy pressure, as you see, and she has good analysis, you see, in her angles. Raven's strong memory brought up past lessons that Miss Loops has talked about, and she knew that the top loops are about ideas, feelings, and imagination. The lower loops, as mentioned before, are about self-expectations and about the practical. And she's thinking, that she's kind of glad that her loops are like this or even smaller. But she has seen people who really have big loops, and she's wondering how they handle it. She's curious to see what Rima's loops are like. Well, she wrote down for herself that her loops, and you see them, are easy to manage. And what did Rima write about her loops? She wrote, well, you see she has easy loops down here, very short and narrow, but but they're not pinched. There's stuff going on down there. But what Rima focused on her imagination loops, which are here, which are also manageable, but nice size. So she has a match, and she says in her own notes, my imagination is bigger than my self-expectation list. And it is because herself, I call it a list. Miss Bloop sometimes calls it a list, what she expects herself to do, but she doesn't expect a lot from herself. And Raven's looking at all this, and her analytical mind is thinking, well, Rima didn't get done what I expected her to do, but she did a unique project graph that the teacher liked. I forgot about that. So she's thinking more about Rima. Well, Ms. Loops is not going to sit still, and she's on to talking about circles, and she loves talking about circles. To her circles, she calls it the flow of what is said. And she says, as always, she does talk about this, that clear circles and all the circles in her example on this page are clear, and they show clear flow. There's nothing blocking these circles. There are closed circles, so the person's mouth is closed unless they have something important to say. And this person has an open circle, and their mouth is open whenever they get a chance to talk. They're more excited to talk. But whatever they say has a clear flow. There's nothing blocking it. Well, of course, you know that Miss Loops now has to talk about the blocked flow. And you see blocked flow up there, and all these are blocked in some way. So when you see circles that have lines in them, there's a hidden plan. It can be devious or not. Whatever is on that person's mind, it's blocking the flow of what they say. And they're kind of talking out the side of their mouth, and they're going to say something else, not what's here on their mind. And when you see a loop, it's this person's private thought or a secret they're holding, depending on the size of the loops. This is a significant size, and this is a pretty good size. That's how much blockage they're holding back in their mouth and not saying. If it's a loop on this side of the circle, then it's a self-denial. Again, the size is going to depend on what's blocking what they're going to say. So, but they'll talk, it's kind of like something is choking them back. So it's not a clear flow. And here, when you see overlapping, well, overlapping is always a blockage. It's either blocking this circle, and or I should say loop that's being blocked. But it's here, they're both being blocked a bit, and they're both confused. The person cannot distinguish or keep these two thoughts clearly separate in their mind. So there's always something they can't keep straight in their mind, and it's really going to mess up their flow of speaking. So how does Raven react to this? How is her communication flow? Well, she's thinking, well, I have a clear a little bit of a loop on my O, but oh no, I have a little backstab, this little line coming into my capital O. These other O's, these circle parts of the middle zone are all clear. So she feels good about that. But she's thinking, what if Rima sees my backstab? Uh-oh, my backstab. I hope Rima doesn't see it. And she's looking at Rima and she's saying, I like that. She's mostly just honest, like me. But what is she keeping to herself? I'd like to know. She's noticing Rima's loop in her O and knows she's keeping something to herself. For the first time ever, she's curious about what's on Rima's mind. But Miss Loops is not stopping at loops. She's going on to pressure, and this is her review of pressure. Well, we know heavy pressure. The person is vibrant, they have intense energy, they're confrontational at times, they must lead, they have fantastic memory that unfortunately also holds grudges if something is done against them. And they take very heavy steps. They press very heavy into their paper. And they don't change, and they won't change. And then we have Mr. Moderate Pressure, and he has a more moderate step on the world. He's energetic, he'll lead or follow, and he will discuss and change his mind if he agrees on things. He's not so adamant, and he doesn't really care to be confrontational. He can be if he feels it's necessary, but it's not a quick thing for him as it is for this guy. But they're all friends and they're all going on this walk. Now, Mr. Light Pressure right here, he's efficient with his limited energy. He avoids confrontation and he wants things to be peaceful around him. And his attitude is, I change to make things more efficient and more cooperative when it works out better for me that way. Right now, he's taking a quick rest, but in a minute or two, he'll be ready to continue on the hike with them. So that's Miss Loop's review on pressure. Hmm. So let's see what Raven thinks. Well, she has a heavy press and she is energetic. And she sometimes, although not really, she can be aggressive. She has this in her cue, but it's not a real harsh push. So or a shove. It's more of a gentle push. So she's not dangerously aggressive. Rima, Raven sees, has a light press. She's energy efficient. She avoids anger and she doesn't compete. And what is Raven thinking about that? Well, Rima has to be so careful what she puts her energy to. I can't imagine that. It's something else she's learned. All right, now Miss Loop, she's on to lines. And we know once she starts talking about straight lines, she's gonna go right into curves and angles next. But right now she's talking about straight lines. And straight movement equals straight focus from start to finish. And she loves this graph. She made this graph herself. And she starts with the head zone or the upper zone where the ideas are. And she says, the person with all straight lines. Now we notice there are curves, but generally this writing is all straight lines. Like this writing is generally a lot of straight lines. So when you see that, the person takes their idea, they have a straight purpose for it, and they bring that idea down straight into the body zone. And the body zone which coordinates ideas, feelings, and communications into plans. Now, that's a lot of work, coordinating ideas, feelings, and communications into a plan. But this person with the straight line, they take it on, they set it up step by step. They do all those things in a straight line, and then they take it right into their action area and get straight to work with their physical action plan and exactly done in exactly the straight method. So that's what you know about a person when you see mainly straight lines. Now we know Raven is a straight line person. And when she sees so many curvy lines, it just hurts her inside. She just can't deal with it. So she's kind of looking away. She knows she'll get to turn around again and look at the next graph, but it's hard for her to look at all these curvy lines. So the person who writes with a lot of curves and a lot of flow going on like this, and they have changeable feelings and changeable focus, and they meander. Ah, that's a lot for Raven to deal with. But we see it here. Their idea keeps curving back and forth, and then their heart gets involved, and even more curves show up, and then their gut gets involved, and oh boy, they got a stomach ache over this one. And then, boy, they back and forth. But once their plan is ready and goes into their leg action zone, well, they're going to change their mind a few more times, but doesn't mean they're not gonna get it done. If they get from here to there on all their lines, they're probably gonna get it done. It's just not a straight line, which for a person like Raven, that's uncomfortable. For a person who writes like this, that's just normal. All right, now Raven can look back. Many sharp angles. She can deal with that. She is comfortable with sharp angles. And she knows, even before Ms. Loops is going to say it because this is Miss Loop's review. She knows that many sharp angles show the person has a lot of insistence, impatience, they're critical, but what she likes best is that it also shows they're quick and they have very and sharp abilities in analysis. Now, Raven can see a problem, see its solution, and figure out exactly what to do about it in a snap of a second. And that's what shows in her sharp angles. But that quickness also brings on some impatience and critical of someone, especially if they're slow. So that's just part of being sharp angled. And we see it here, sharp angles from head to toe. That analysis is just zigzag, 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 get to the point, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Okay, done. But sometimes too many angles bring in points of anger. And sometimes you have to stop for that anger. The person gets upset, could explode. You could see it in their temper tics right here. Temper tics show that they're fast to, their temper is quick to explode or show up. One thing about Raven that she's very proud of is she does not have a bunch of temper tics. In fact, she hardly has any, just a lot of good sharp angles. So now they're comparing, Raven is comparing their writings. And what Raven writes about herself with her straight lines and her angles is I follow my plan straight and quick. And she knows this because she sees the curvy writing. My mind changes. This is Rima. My mind changes and my plans change. And I need time to meander a lot. And, oh, when Raven sees that and she knows that changing plans drives me crazy. Why does she do that? And we know that's hard for Raven. Oh, all right. Now Miss Loops is on to her next topic. Fast or slow? And this is a big one for Miss Loop. She loves talking about this because she admires both. She admires fast writing and she admires slow writing. And that drives Raven a little crazy because slow drives her crazy. But Miss Loops has a slower writing than Raven's and she appreciates both. So what is Miss Loops going to tell us about fast writing? Well, fast writing looks like it flies across the page. And what does it say about the person, this tornado fast person who's flying across the page? Well, it shows that they come to a decision quick. They're just moving along so fast, their hand can't even keep up with them. And generally, there's a lot of um, straight, but kind of uh, curve also when it makes it faster. But their connections are generally straight, even though there's a little curve in them. So they're straight and can be impatient because they're so fast. Their writing, though, is not tight. It's loose because that's faster, but it also shows they're in a hurry. So they're loose, but they want to get there fast. And they're not exact. Don't ask them to be exact. They're not going to stop for dotting their I's exactly so. And maybe their T bars are going to fly off to the side, even though these particular ones in this example, the way I set it up, they're here. But mostly when people are fast, their T-bars and their I dots are all over the place. So they're not exact and they're less detailed, but they are very quick And another sign of quickness is no extras. What are the extras? Well, extra loops, extra swings into the beginning of their writing. We call them lead-in loops or lead-in humps or lead-in whatever, and doodads around in the letters, but not here. No, no, no. No extras. This is straight directness, right to the end of the page. Okay, now after all that fast writing, let's look at slow writing. And slow writing, it's slow. If you're a fast person, it's hard to watch somebody who's slow. But as long as it's not standing still and as long as it's moving forward, slow writing has some advantages. And what are the advantages? Well, they're slow, so they have more time to use their imagination. And so they usually bring or can more easily bring imagination into what it is they're writing about. The other thing about slow is that it's usually round, has a lot of roundness in it, and round is generally friendlier. They're not in such a hurry. They'll spend more time in friendly pursuits with the people around them. Okay, this is a little tighter. It's showing that the person who's slow is slowing up, being a little tighter in their writing. They're not so loose, but on the other hand, they're more exact. They are going to dot the I right there. It's going to be close and show that they are going to be exact. The T bar is right across the T stem, equal on both sides. All right, so we know they're slow, round, tighter. They're also careful, and that goes along with being more detailed. And the extras, oh yeah, you're going to see extras. You're going to see loops. You're going to see a loop here, which a lot of people say this little loop on the I means they like to hum or sing. So they might be humming along, taking up time humming, thinking about the song they're thinking. And there's a loop here. And there's a secret loop here that they're thinking about, and some here, and maybe even a misshapen letter or two because they're kind of thinking about other things. They have this extra loop. So there's all kinds of things that can go on with slowness. But again, if they start at their lines, get to the end, and keep doing it over and over in a regular fashion, they will get things done. So how do Raven and Rima compare up in their fast and slow? Well, we know Raven is fast and she's quick in decisions. She's impatient with others. She knows that about herself because she's been told it 100 times. And Rima, she's reading what Rima wrote, that she's slow thinking, but her slow thinking because she's thinking of possibilities and ways to be friendly. So, what does Raven think of that? Well, she takes so much time for a decision, but she does take time to care about others. So, Raven has some respect for that. Oh boy, Ms. Loops is ready. She's still in her experiment mode, and Raven and Rima and the other kids in the Cursive Clues Club are not aware that they're part of this experiment. But Miss Loops is aware, and she's beginning her test. And the first rules are no discussion. Look at the handwriting of the person next to you. And her next instruction is in your mind, design a project you can both do, and she means both do together, that you will both enjoy. Oh. Well, today's review helped Raven understand what it feels like to be Rima, and she had been so annoyed with Rima on the science project. But now she sees it's that they're different in how they do things, and she has to think this through, which we know she can do. She has those good analytic angles. But she knows Miss Loop said no talking and look at the handwriting. So that's exactly what she's going to do. And she's all of a sudden notice that Rima's middle zone is her main zone. It's not, she doesn't have a very tall upper zone, and she doesn't have much of a lower zone. I don't have many lower zone letters in there, but we've seen that before. And so she knows she's less patient and faster, but she also seeing that Rima is best at practical and social plans. And she's thinking about a project that they can both do. And she's thinking, well, Rima can do the people part of the project while I lead another part. But what are we going to do? Ah, she's thinking more. She's thinking, I need to do something active while leading. Of course she does. And she's thinking of what Rima is good at. Well, Rima's thinking, I'm good at sitting and drawing posters. And Raymond is thinking, well, Rima did make that good graph. She'd be good at making signs. All right, she's come up with her idea, which she has been thinking about for a long time. And she's thinking, I do want to clean up the playground, and maybe Rima could think of ways to get others to help me. And Rima is good at coming up with new ideas. She's very practical. Oh, finally, Ms. Loops says to them, it's time to start discussing. Oh, Raven can't wait. She's so impatient now. So she's had this idea for a few weeks and felt maybe it could work. And finally, she gets to propose it to Rima. I would like your help to arrange a park cleanup this Saturday. Now, how is Rima going to respond? Happily. And Raven goes on, I will lead a crew, because remember, Raven has to be in charge. I will lead a crew in picking up the litter and piling up the bags for the garbage trucks. Would you arrange posters and get people in our class to sign up to help? Well, Rima is already got ideas going and all excited. And it's now Rima's turn to talk. And what does she say? Well, this is what I secretly hoped for someday. I always wanted to plan a big picnic for classmates, but I don't have friends to ask. And Raven is just happy that Rima is happy for this chance. They're both starting to shine. Notice she's finally got a curvy smile. Oh, and Reem is coming up with more ideas right on the moment. I will make posters and cupcakes and lemonade and set up a donation jar to pay for the garbage bags. It will be so much fun. And they both are thinking and saying to each other, I like your ideas. And because they both learned how to understand each other, they became good friends. And that's what the Miss Loop's experiment was. Handwriting compatibility experiment is a success. She set it up so that her review made them look at each other's writing and understand each other, even though she knew, and she purposely paired people together who she knew did not really get along. And the epilogue of the story is the park cleanup was a success. The experiment was a success, and the park cleanup was a success. The end.